His own words. You'll hear about Saucy Jackie's work.
Also his own words. Double event this time.
And a surgical operation. Victim number 3, Elizabeth Stride.
Age, 45. Height, 5 feet 5 inches. Dark curly hair. On the streets. Drank. Some front teeth missing.
Yeah, well, they didn't have free school milk then either. Body discovered sometime during the morning of Sunday, the 30th of September, 1888.
By the man with the pony and trap.
My name is Louis Diemschutz. I live at number 40 Berner Street. I'm steward of the International Working Men's Club there. I am married, and my wife lives at the club too and assists in the management. On Saturday, I left home about 11:30 in the morning and returned exactly 1 o'clock Sunday morning. I noticed the time at the baker shop at the corner of Berner Street. I had been to the market near the Crystal Palace. I had a barrow like a costermonger's, drawn by a pony. I drove home to leave my goods. I drove into the yard. Both gates were wide open. It was rather dark there. All at once, my pony shied at some object on the right. I looked to see what the object was and observed that it was something unusual, but could not say what. It was a dark object. I put my whip handle to it and tried to lift it up. But as I did not succeed, I jumped down from my barrow and struck a match. It was rather windy, and I could only get sufficient light to see that there was some figure there. I could tell from the dress that it was a figure of a woman. I then went into the club and I asked where my wife was. I found her in the front room on the ground floor. There were several members in the front room, and I told them all that there was a woman lying in the yard, though I could not say whether she was drunk or dead. I then got a candle and went into the yard. I could see the blood before I reached the body. Perhaps I should not have noticed the body if my pony had not shied.
Horse sense.
It was a copper found the next one.
I went on duty on my regular beat. That takes me along Mitre Street and into Mitre Square. I passed through Mitre Square at 1:30 on the Sunday morning. I had my lantern alight and on, fixed to my belt. I looked into the different passages and corners. There was no one about. I next came into Mitre Square at 1:44. I found nobody lying on the right as I came into the square. The woman was on her back with her feet toward the square. Her clothes were thrown up. Well, I saw her throat was cut and the stomach ripped open. She was lying in a pool of blood.
It's the nerve of him. He finds one woman, kills her, cuts her throat, and he's likely interrupted by that pony and trap. But does he give up? Oh, no. No, he walks 3/4 of a mile, finds another woman, and kills her.
Catherine Eddowes, aged 43.
Another unfortunate.
Yeah, this one's somehow the most pathetic to me. She may have been married to a man called Thomas Conway, but for the last 7 years of her life, she lived with John Kelly. This really was living and partly living.
Oh, we got thrown together a good bit here in this lodging house. The result was we made a regular bargain. We've lived here ever since, except when we gone up in. How she get a job charring now and then? I'd pick up any odd job I could get in the market. She'd take a drop to drink, but she was never troublesome. We went hopping together mostly every year. We're down this year, but we didn't get along any too well, so we started to hoof it home. We didn't have enough money to keep us going till we get to town. But we did get there. And we come straight here. How the luck was dead against us. We was both of us done for cash. I had nothing but a pair of boots that'd bring anything. And I says to her, we'll pop the boots. Get a bite to eat anyway. She said she'd go and see what her daughter could do. I serve her. We popped the boots anyway.
They found 2 pawn tickets on the body for a man's flannel shirt and a pair of men's boots, pledged for 1 and 6 each. And a ticket that was in the name of Kelly.
It owes Conway Kelly. What does it matter? She died all the same.
It's odd, though, isn't it? Catherine Kelly and then Mary Kelly.
You think Jack had a down on Kellys?
Might have been looking for one in particular.
Oh. Let's stick with the facts, for the time being, anyway. Now, the man Kelly gave evidence at the inquest, too.
It's what I find, well, touching. He and the woman were tacking about. She was sleeping in one place and he in another, because they couldn't raise the 8pence they needed to rent a bed for 2.
We come up from Kent for an hopping on Thursday. We didn't have any money and we went to the casual ward in Shoe Lane. We were together all Friday till the afternoon. I earned a 6pence. I wanted to spend it on food, but she says to me, you take 4pence and go to the lodging house and give me 2pence. I'll go to the casual ward. She left me at 4 o'clock to go to Mile End for lodging. I saw her next morning about 8 o'clock. I saw her last about 2 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. She said she was going to see if she could find her daughter Annie in Bermondsey. Well, she said she'd be back at 4 o'clock. But I heard from a woman that she'd seen her in Houndsditch with 2 policemen. I heard she'd been locked up because she had a drop to drink. I didn't go and ask about her because I was sure she'd turn up on Sunday morning.
He thought she was safe in the hands of the law.
It was the wrong law. She'd gone a couple of 100 yards too far. In the Mets district, they locked drunks up all night. But she'd crossed the boundary. She was in the city. And the city police let them out when they were sober. So they let her out. And within half an hour, she was dead.
At 8:30 on Saturday evening, I was on duty at Aldgate. I saw a crowd of people and the woman whom I've since recognised as the deceased. She was drunk and lying on the footway. I asked if anyone knew her or where she lived, but got no answer. I picked her up and propped her against some shutters, but she fell down again. I got assistance and struck a match and looked at her face. She appeared drunk. I took her to Bishopsgate Police Station, and when she got to the station and was asked her name, she said nothing. We then put her in a cell.
I remember the deceased being brought in at 8:45. She was very drunk and had to be supported by 2 constables. She was placed in a cell till 1 o'clock on Sunday morning. When she was sober, she was discharged after giving her name and address as Kate Kelly, 6 Fashion Street, Spitalfields.
I took over the prisoners at 9:45, including the deceased. I visited her several times until 5 minutes to 1 on the following morning. At this time, the inspector was out visiting, and I was directed by Sergeant Byfield to see if any of the prisoners was fit for discharge. I found the deceased sober, and she was discharged. I pushed open the swing doors leading to the passage, and I said, "This way, missus, pass along the passage to the outer door." She said, "All right, night, old cock." She pulled the door to within half a foot of closing it, and I saw her turn to the left towards Houndsditch.
Is it usual to discharge prisoners locked up for being drunk at all hours of the night?
Yes. When I first went to visit her, I found her asleep. At about 12, she was singing a song to herself, and at 12:30, she said to me, "When am I going to get out?" I said, when you are able to take care of yourself. She said, I am quite able to take care of myself now.
Did she say where she was going?
Well, coming out to sell, she asked what time it was. I said, too late for you to get any more drink. She said, well now, what time is it? I said, just on 1. She said, I shall get a damn good hiding when I get home. I said, that serves you right for getting drunk.
I gather from that you supposed she was going home.
I did.
Can you tell me the distance from your station to Mitre Square?
About 400 yards.
I gave orders that every man and woman seen together after midnight were to be stopped and questioned. They may have met and then gone separately to Mitre Square, but that woman was let out alone at 5 to 1. If we'd followed her and then called men to guard the approaches of that square, we would have caught the Ripper red-handed.
Major Henry Smith, Acting Commissioner of Police of the City of London, blowing his top.
I've never known that do much good.
Oh, I have.
So, let's stay with the victim already slain, Elizabeth Stride. She had a fellow as well, Michael Kidney. Lived at 35 Dorset Street. He gave evidence at the inquest on Long Liz.
It is Long Liz. I've known her about 3 years, and she's lived with me nearly all that time. I left her in Commercial Street as I was going to work. I expected her to be at home, but when I got home, I found she'd been in and gone out. She was subject to going away whenever she thought she would. During the 3 years I've known her, she's been away from me altogether about 5 months. I cautioned her the same as I would a wife. It's a drink that made her go, but she always came back. I don't believe she left me on Tuesday to take up with any other man. I think she liked me better than any other man. I didn't see her again until I identified the body in the mortuary.
On Sunday morning, between 12:30 and 1, I was standing outside the B.I.'s public house at the corner of Christian Street with my young woman. 2 Jews came running along, calling out, "Murder!" and "Police!" Well, they ran as far as Grove Street, then they came back. I went with them to the yard and saw the woman lying just inside the gate. There was about 15 people in the yard all standing around. One man struck a match, but I saw the woman before that. I put my hand under her chin. When the match was alighting, her chin was slightly warm. There was blood still flowing from her throat. I stood by the body for about 4 or 5 minutes until Constable Lamb arrived.
There were about 30 people in the yard and others followed me in. No one was nearer than the yard to the body. Put my hand on the face and it was slightly warm. She was laying on her left side and her left hand was on the ground. Her face was no more than 5 or 6 inches away from the club wall. There was no sign of a struggle. Some of the blood was in the liquid state and had run to the kitchen door of the club. And the little that nearest to her on the ground was slightly congealed. Dr. Blackwell was the first doctor to arrive. He came about 10, 12 minutes after me.
I consulted my watch on my arrival at the yard. It was 1:16 a.m. The dead woman was lying on her left side, obliquely across the passage, her face looking towards the right wall. Her legs were drawn up, her feet close against the wall of the right side of the passage. Her dress was unfastened at the neck. The neck and chest were quite warm, as were also the legs, and the face was slightly warm. The hands were cold. The right hand was open and on the chest and was smeared with blood. The left hand, lying on the ground, was partially closed and contained a small packet of cashew wrapped in tissue paper. The appearance of the face was quite placid. The deceased had round her neck a check silk scarf, the bow of which was turned to the left and pulled very tight. In the neck there was a long incision which exactly corresponded with the lower border of the scarf. The border was slightly frayed, as if by a sharp knife. The incision in the neck commenced on the left side, 2.5 inches below the angle of the jaw and almost in a direct line with it, nearly severing the vessels on that side, cutting the windpipe completely in two, and terminating on the opposite side 1 inch below the angle of the right jaw. The blood was running down the gutter into the drain in the opposite direction from the feet. The bonnet of the deceased was lying on the ground a few inches from the head. I form the opinion the murderer probably caught hold of the silk scarf, which was tight and knotted, and pulled the deceased backwards, cutting her throat in that way. The throat might have been cut as she was falling or when she was on the ground. The blood would have spurted if the act had been committed while she was standing up. In my opinion, she had been dead for 20 minutes to half an hour when I arrived. The clothes were not wet with rain. She would have bled to death comparatively slowly, on account of the vessels on one side only of the neck being cut and the artery not completely severed.
Now, 20 minutes to half an hour. He arrived at 1:16, so she was killed between 12:45 and 12:55.
Not midnight.
No, it must have been later, and my guess is near to 12:55, because all he did was cut her throat, and that wasn't our Jack's form at all. But he was bending over her when he heard Dimshut's pony coming. I reckon he was there by the gate then, and he slipped away. And because he hadn't had time to finish the job the way he wanted to, he went to Mitre Square, and 3/4 of an hour later, killed Catherine Eddowes.
Doing his real work.
Night, old cock.
Night, love.
The body was on its back. The arms were by the side of the body as if they'd fallen there. There was great disfigurement of the face. The eyelids, the nose, the jaw, the cheeks, the lips, and the mouth all bore cuts. There were abrasions under the left ear. The throat was cut across to the extent of 6 or 7 inches. Below the cut was a handkerchief. The abdomen was all exposed. The intestines were drawn out to a large extent and placed over the right shoulder. A piece of the intestines was quite detached from the body and placed between the left arm and the body.
By placed, do you mean put there by design?
Yes.
Would that also apply to the intestines that were over the right shoulder?
Yes. In addition, the lobe of the right ear was cut obliquely through.
I understand you found certain portions of the body removed.
Yes. The uterus was cut away, with the exception of a small portion, and the left kidney was cut out. Both these organs were absent and have not been found.
Mr. Lusk got a piece, though.
A number of prominent Whitechapel citizens are concerned about the current state of affairs that is damaging the good name of the borough and the inability of the police to cope with the latest developments. The widespread panic caused by the recent murders has resulted, among other things, in a very sad loss of trade, owing to the fact that respectable women are frightened to go out onto the streets at night. As the result of a meeting held at the Crown in the Mile End Road on Monday evening, a Whitechapel Vigilance Committee was formed. Mr. Joseph Aarons has agreed to serve as treasurer, and the chairman of the committee is Mr. George Lusk. A further meeting will be held shortly to determine what steps to take to meet this menace in our midst.
Poor Mr. Lusk. I bet he could have done without being menaced with that kidney.
Poor Mr. Lusk, my foot. Probably enjoyed seeing his name in all the papers.
Probably didn't occur to him that the Ripper read the papers as well. From hell, Mr. Lusk, sir, I send you half the kidney I took from one woman, preserved it for you, t'other piece I fried and ate. It was very nice. I may send you the bloody knife that took it out if you only wait a while longer. Signed, catch me when you can, Mr. Lusk.
A real joker.
It was a real kidney.
The kidney and the note that came with it were sent on to me. Unfortunately, as always happens, some clerk or assistant in the office was got at, and the whole affair was public property next morning. The newspaper scoffed at the idea that the kidney really was from the body of the Ripper's latest victim. The kidney was from a dog, wrote one. Taken out of a corpse after a post-mortem, wrote another. A transparent hoax. I sent it to the police surgeon, Gordon Brown, instructing him to consult with the most eminent men in the profession and to send me a report without delay. The substance of their findings is as follows. The kidney that was sent to Mr. Lusk belonged to a person of about 45.
Eddowes was 43 and an alcoholic.
It was, according to the doctors, a ginny kidney, showing evidence of an advanced stage of Bright's disease. The kidney in Eddowes' body revealed a similar condition. As to the theory that the kidney had been taken from some corpse after a post-mortem, the body of anyone done to death by violence is not taken directly to the dissecting room, but must await an inquest, never held until the following day at the earliest. Mr. Sutton, one of the senior surgeons at the London hospital, and one of the greatest authorities living on the human kidney, said that he would pledge his reputation that the kidney submitted to him had been put in spirits within a few hours of its removal from the body. And finally, the renal artery in the human body is about 3 inches long. 2 inches were found in the corpse of Eddowes. The remaining 1 inch was attached to the kidney sent to Mr. Lusk.
Anatomical knowledge.
Would you consider that the person who inflicted the wounds possessed anatomical skill?
He must have had a good deal of knowledge as to the position of the abdominal organs and the way to remove them. The way the kidney was cut out shows that it was done by somebody who knew what he was about.
Would such a knowledge be likely to be possessed by someone accustomed to cutting up animals?
Yes.
Have you been able to form any opinion as to whether the perpetrator of this act was disturbed when performing it?
I think he had sufficient time. My reason is that he would not have nicked the lower eyelids if he'd been in a great hurry.
So, another affirmative for anatomical knowledge.
Aye. But there's less talk about him being left-handed this time, isn't there?
Mm-hmm. There was some at the inquest on Longley's stride, then.
2 doctors. The one who came out most firmly was our old friend...
George Bagster Phillips, 2 Spittal Square. I was called at 1:20 on Sunday morning to Leman Street Police Station, and from there sent to Berner Street. The body was lying on the near side, with the face turned to the wall. The left arm was extended, and there was a packet of cachou in the left hand. A number of these were in the gutter. I took them out of her hand and gave them to Dr. Blackwell. I found in the pocket of the underskirt of the deceased the following articles: a key, as if belonging to a padlock, a small piece of lead pencil, a pocket comb, a broken piece of comb, a metal spoon, some buttons, and a hook.
Dr. Phillips...
I will answer any questions put to me. But as there is another case pending, I think I had better stop here.
What is the cause of death?
It is undoubtedly from loss of blood from the left carotid artery and the division of the windpipe.
Did you examine the blood at Berner Street?
I did. Roughly estimating it, I should say there was an unusual flow of blood, considering the stature and nourishment of the body.
How long had the deceased been dead when you arrived?
Within the hour she had been alive.
Have you formed any opinion how the right hand of the deceased was covered with blood?
No, that is a mystery. I may say I am taking it as a fact, that the hand always remained in the same position in which I found it, resting across the body.
Would the presence of the cachou in the hand show that it was done suddenly, or would it simply show a muscular grasp?
I cannot say.
Was there anything in the cut to show that the incision was done with a pointed knife?
No.
Would the murderer be likely to get bloodstained?
Not necessarily, for the commencement of the wound and the injuries to the blood vessels would be away from him. The absence of noise is a difficult question in this case. She might have called out and not have been heard.
Could you give us any idea of the position of the victim?
I have come to the conclusion that the deceased was seized by the shoulders and placed on the ground, and that the perpetrator of the deed was on her right side when he inflicted the cut. I am of the opinion that the cut was made from the left to the right side of the deceased.
Would the injury take long to inflict?
Only a few seconds. It could have been done in 2 seconds.
Good word, that, perpetrator. He was on her right, and the cut ran from her left to right. Dr. Blackwell's evidence agrees with that.
While she was on the ground. Well, that would make sense if he didn't want to get blood all over her. Doesn't sound like a left-handed cut to me, though. Come and be long-lived stride.
Huh? Anything to oblige?
Now, she had a scarf on. The knot was pulled over to her left, so. If I was going to kill you, I'd put my left arm round you like so, grab the scarf, pull the knot up like that. That would pull her backwards, go down with her, and then this would expose the throat, and the cut was from left to right, as both the doctors say. Couldn't do that if I was left-handed, though. Unless I worked from the front, but then it would have to be a backwards cut. No, no positive confirmation of left-handed. You all right?
I'm fine. Just lying here waiting to be disemboweled.
Don't confuse me. You're long-lived stride, not Catherine Eddowes.
Across the throat, from left to right. The sign of the entered apprentice.
You what?
The sign of the entered apprentice.
Sorcery?
You do a bit of conjuring. What did the Ripper look like?
Well, I made a list of people who saw a man with long limbs not long before she died.
They contradict each other.
They cancel each other out.
So?
It's not just prejudice, but the one I rather like the sound of is PC452H Smith William.
My beat was past Berners Street and would take me 25 minutes or half an hour to go round. I was in Berners Street about 12:30 or 20 minutes to 1.
Did you notice any man or woman in Berners Street when you were there then?
Yes, talking together.
Was the woman anything like the deceased?
Yes, I saw her face, and I think that the body in the mortuary is that of the same woman.
Are you certain?
I feel certain. She stood on the pavement a few yards from where the body was found, but on the opposite side of the street.
Did you look at the man at all?
Yes.
What did you notice about him?
He had a parcel wrapped in a newspaper in his hand. The parcel was about 18 inches long by about 6 to 8 inches broad.
Did you notice his height?
He was about 5'7".
What about his hat?
He wore a dark felt deerstalker's hat.
What about his clothes?
His clothes were dark. The coat was a cutaway coat.
Did you overhear any conversation?
No.
Did they seem to be sober?
Yes, both.
Did you see the man's face?
He had no whiskers, but I did not notice him much. I should say he was about 28 years of age. He was of a respectable appearance, but I could not say what he was. The woman had a flower in her breast. When I saw the body at the mortuary, I recognized it at once.
He sounds convincing. Not too dogmatic.
So we can compare his description with that given by Mrs. Long in the case of Annie Chapman.
Agreed. She said dark, brown deerstalker, over 40, shabby genteel.
And Smith says dark felt deerstalker, dark clothes, cutaway coat, About 5'7", respectable, no whiskers, about 28. There are discrepancies.
There's a description from murder number 4.
Catherine Eddowes.
Joseph Lavande, a commercial traveller.
I left the Imperial Club at about 2 that morning. I saw a man and a woman standing together at the corner of Church Passage in Duke Street, which leads into Mitre Square. The woman was standing with her face towards the man. I couldn't see her face. The man was taller than she was. She had on a black jacket and bonnet. I saw her put her hand on a man's chest.
Can you tell us what sort of a man it was with whom she was speaking?
He was wearing a cloth cap with a peak.
Unless the jury wish it, I have a special reason why no further description of this man should be given now.
Oh, damn. That was beginning to sound quite promising.
He did give the description to the police. And Major Smith, the acting commissioner of the city police, adds a few more details.
The description of the man given to me by the man who was leaving the club was as follows. Young, about the middle height, with a small fair moustache, dressed in something like navy serge and with a deerstalker's cap. I think he spoke the truth, because I could not lead him in any way. I said to him, "You'll easily recognize him then." "Oh, no," he said. "I only had a short look at him."
Convincing, too. In your terms, because he's anything but dogmatic. So young, middle height, small fair moustache, and the deerstalker cap again.
Sure it wasn't Sherlock Holmes?
That's you.
Ta. The what is more like Watson, and you're more like Major Smith.
Just because I blow my top from time to time.
Not only that, he was a great one for going on the job himself.
Well, he hasn't been much in evidence, has he?
More than most of the brats from Scotland Yard.
Ah, makes funny reading, doesn't it? A new assistant commissioner of crime is appointed, Dr. Robert Anderson.
Supposed to be in charge of CID, and he's not even a policeman, let alone a detective, a doctor of law, a barrister.
Lawyers should stick to the court. I mean, no lawyer ever made a good thief catcher.
And not just a barrister, an Irish barrister. He'd done some work catching home rulers running about with bombs.
Yeah. They put him in charge of CID. Dr. Robert Anderson takes up his appointment the night before Mary Ann Nichols is killed. He stays 1 week at the Yard. Then the 8th of September, Annie Chapman is killed, and on the 9th, Dr. Anderson leaves for his holidays in Switzerland.
He's good and smug and unctuous about it, too.
When the staid English go in for a scare, they take leave of all moderation and common sense. If nonsense were solid, the nonsense that was talked and written about the murders would sink a dreadnought. The subject is an unsavory one. It is enough to say that the wretched victims belonged to a very small class of degraded women who frequent the East End streets after midnight in the hope of inveigling belated drunkards or men as degraded as themselves.
After 3 weeks in Switzerland, Dr. Anderson, as a great concession, comes as near as Paris. To be in touch, as he said, though there were no London to Paris telephones, and telegrams went just as fast to Switzerland.
Did he ever come back?
I received an urgent appeal from the Home Secretary to return to London. So, of course, I complied.
That was the night of our double event.
And did he do anything?
I spent the day of my return to town and half the following night in re-investigating the whole case. And next day, I had a long conference on the subject with the Secretary of State and the Commissioner of Police. The Secretary of State said, "We hold you responsible to find the murderer." I replied, "I hold myself responsible to take all legitimate means to find him." But I went on to say that the measures I found in operation were, in my opinion, wholly indefensible and scandalous, for these wretched women were plying their trade under definite police protection.
Not very effective protection.
Anderson had 2 ideas.
Let us warn them. The police will not protect them.
They likely didn't need the warning. Second idea?
Let the police of that district receive orders to arrest any known street woman found on the prowl after midnight.
Where was he going to put them all?
He didn't say. Mind you, that was a sensible idea compared to the ideas printed in the papers. The suggestion that Scotland Yard should disguise some of its men as women in order to trap the Whitechapel killer has been rejected by a top police official. The official points out that none of his men are less than 5'7", and that nearly all wear moustaches, which they would be reluctant to shave off. However, there are a number of well-trained pugilists in Whitechapel. These, as is the custom in their profession, are clean-shaven. 20 game men of this class in women's clothing loitering about would have more chance than any number of heavy-footed policemen. Another idea has come from one of our readers, Mr. Spencer Howell. He writes, I would suggest that a few young men of somewhat feminine appearance should be got up disguised as females. It seems the assassin first severs his victim's windpipe, thereby preventing her raising the alarm. To overcome this, these men could wear around their necks steel collars, coming well down the breast.
Somebody must have been more practical.
There was Major Smith. Jack the Ripper had walked only 3/4 of a mile that night after killing Elizabeth Stride. But he'd walked out of the metropolitan area into the territory of the city police. He may have done it deliberately, for all I know, thinking that even the Met would be jumping up and down after the first murder. So, Major Henry Smith had the Ripper on his own patch. Not that he hadn't been trying to catch him before. That night, he was sleeping in a police station, Cloak Lane, next to Southwark Bridge.
The night of Saturday, 29th of September, found me tossing about in my bed at the Cloak Lane station. There was a railway goods depot in front of my rooms and a furrier's premises behind them. The lane was a causeway, and there were heavy vans going constantly in and out. And the sickening smell from the furrier's skins, you could not open the windows, and sleep was an impossibility. Suddenly, the bell at my head rang violently. A voice said, "There's been another murder, sir, this time in the city." I was dressed and in the street in a couple of minutes. There was a hansom at the door, and I jumped into it. It was licensed to carry 2, and it didn't take me long to discover that a 15-stone superintendent inside with me and 3 detectives hanging on did nothing to add to its safety or comfort. We rode like a sailing ship in a gale, but we got to Mitre Square without an upset, where I found a small group of my men standing round the mutilated remains of a woman.
The upset came when he found his own men had disobeyed.
That woman was let out alone at 5 to 1. If we'd followed her...
A chain is as strong as its weakest link.
Try making a leather chain. Here, Detective Sergeant Daniel House.
When I saw the dead woman in the mortuary, I noticed that a piece of her apron was missing. About half of it. It had been cut off with a clean cut. And when I got back to Mitre Square, I heard that a piece of apron had been found in Galston Street. I went there with Detective Hunt to the spot where the apron had been discovered. There I saw some chalk writing on the wall. I stayed there and I sent Hunt to find Mr. McWilliam. He wanted instructions to have the writing photographed. Directions were given for that to be done. But some members of the Metropolitan Police were present, and it was decided to have the writing rubbed out.
It was decided to have the writing rubbed out.
You heard?
Who decided?
Don't you want to know what the writing was?
I'm much more interested in knowing what policeman decided off his own bat to destroy evidence practically as soon as it had been discovered.
I'm not absolutely sure just who decided, though I'm pretty sure, and I'm pretty sure I know why. And it wasn't for the reason that was said at the time. It's all in the inquest.
I was on duty in Galston Street, Whitechapel, at about 2:55 a.m. when I found a portion of an apron. There were recent stains of blood on it. It was lying in a passage leading to a staircase of numbers 118 and 119, which are ordinary dwelling houses. Above it on the wall was writing in chalk. It said, "The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing." I at once searched the staircases and areas of the landing, but found nothing. I then took the piece of apron to Commercial Road Police Station and reported to the inspector on duty.
Are you sure that those were the exact words you saw written on the wall? Have you not put the word "not" in the wrong place? Is it not the Jews are not the men that will be blamed for nothing?
The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing.
How do you spell Jews?
J-W-S.
Now, was it not on the wall J-U-W-E-S? J-U-W-E-S. Is it not possible you are wrong?
It may be as to the spelling.
Do you have with you the pocketbook in which you made the entry at the time?
No, that's at the station at Westminster.
We shall postpone further examination of this witness. I would like the pocketbook produced in court as soon as possible.
What's all this fuss about spelling? J-E-W-S, J-U-W-E-S. Doesn't mean anything to me.
Would you read out to us the exact words you took down in your book at the time?
The Jews are not the men that will be blamed for nothing.
That is J-U-W-E-S.
Yes.
In your opinion, the writing had been done recently?
Yes, it appeared to have been recently done.
Did anyone suggest that it would be possible to take out the word Jews and leave the rest of the writing there?
Oh, I suggested the top line might be rubbed out, and the Metropolitan Police suggested the word Jews. They were afraid of a riot, and that was the only reason for rubbing out the writing.
Did you protest against this action?
Yes, I did. I wanted it left until Major Smith had seen it. But the spot where the writing was on Metropolitan Police ground, and they insisted on having the writing rubbed out.
This is ridiculous. The point is evidence had been destroyed. I mean, that could easily have been done by Jack the Ripper, and it was rubbed out. That is what is important, not whether the spelling's right or not.
Mr. Crawford was very interested in this particular piece of spelling, and so am I. Because I think I know exactly what Mr. Crawford was getting at. And if I'm right, it tells us a good deal more about Jack the Ripper than whether he could spell or not.
This pocketbook contains the entry you made at the time as to the words written on the wall.
Yes, it does. What I wrote down was, the Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing. The inspector made the remark that on the wall the word was J-U-W-E-S. I entered in my book what I thought was an exact copy of the words.
At all events, there was a discrepancy between what you wrote down and what was actually written on the wall, as far as regards the spelling of the word Jews.
The only remark the inspector made was about the spelling of the word Jews. I was there when the writing was rubbed out. That was about 5:30 or thereabouts.
5:05, 6:15, 10:15. What does it matter? Who ordered that writing rubbed out? Why wasn't Crawford worrying about that instead of chasing around after spelling mistakes?
I think Mr. Crawford felt it might have been improper for him to do that. After all, he was acting for the city police. And according to Major Henry Smith, the head of the city police, the man who ordered the writing to be rubbed off was Sir Charles Warren, the Chief Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police.
Was it, by God?
Yes. And he was on the spot double quick when he heard about it.
But why order it to be rubbed out? If he didn't want people to see it, he could have had it covered up. Posted a couple of bobbies there, at least until the photographer arrived. After all, it was only 5:30 in the morning.
It is odd, isn't it?
Odd? It's extraordinary.
And according to Sir Charles, the reason for having those words rubbed out was that he was afraid of riots against the Jews. But that still doesn't explain why he went to the lengths of destroying the evidence completely and in such a hurry.
Panic, maybe. Or perhaps he got his priorities wrong. I'd say the best way to stop riots in Whitechapel would be to catch the Ripper. But then Warren wouldn't think like that, would he? He wasn't a copper. He was a soldier, a law and order man.
And he proved it, too. November the 13th, 1887.
Bloody Sunday.
In exercise of the powers vested in me under the Act 2 and 3 Vict. Cap 47, I hereby make the following regulation. No organized procession shall be allowed to approach Trafalgar Square on Sunday, November the 13th. Charles Warren, the Commissioner of the Police of the Metropolis.
And after seeing that posted up, guess where the organized procession's headed straight for?
Sir Charles Warren doing his job the way he saw it.
It is not that I apprehend any organized movement from the socialists themselves or from any other organized body, but it is from the roughs and criminals who always attach themselves to large processions and meetings that I anticipate serious damage to property.
Property. The great Victorian god.
You still better not let your chief constable hear you talking like that. The police are there to prevent damage to persons and to property, so Warren was right. And at least he believed in the idea that if a job was worth doing, it was worth doing well.
100 men will take up position in single file along the ramparts on each side of the square on the outside. Inside, there'll be 120 in double file. There'll be 100 men at the head of each row of steps leading into the square. 50 more will cover the corners. The front of the square will be held by 750 men in ranks of 4 deep. 300 mounted police will patrol in pairs. Processions approaching the square will be broken up by the reserve force of 2,500 men. 300 lifeguards will remain in reserve. 300 grenadier guards will be held behind the National Gallery. If called upon, they will line the parapets with fixed bayonets.
I don't go for that bit.
Things were rougher then, and they didn't call it Bloody Sunday for nothing.
Just before 4 o'clock, an excited movement was visible among the crowd at the Strand entrance to the square. A column of about 400 men advanced, led by a gentleman without a hat and by another person. These turned out to be Mr. Cunningham Graham, MP, and Mr. Burns, the well-known socialist, who had come with the avowed intention of testing the legality of Sir Charles Warren's proclamation. Mr. Graham is alleged to have made a determined rush at the police and to have assaulted some of the constables in an attempt to get through the files. He had no stick in his hand, but is said to have used his fists freely. The police used their batons, and Mr. Graham received a blow on the head, inflicting a wound which bled freely. At 4:45, a detachment of 200 lifeguards entered the square. And at 5:10, the Grenadier Guards wheeled down into the square, their rifles on their shoulders, their bayonets fixed, and 20 rounds of ball cartridge in their pouches. In front of the National Gallery, they halted, opened up into lines, and drove the crowd back from the roadway. A few showed a disposition to maintain their ground, but 2 or 3 of the soldiers brought their bayonets to the charge, and this ended all thoughts of resistance. By 6 o'clock, all danger of further disturbance was at an end. More than 150 persons were conducted to the neighbouring hospitals for surgical treatment.
And they gave Sir Charles Warren the KCB in December.
And the Order of the Boot the following November.
Fair enough. Good at stopping riots, bad at catching rippers.
Except I still reckon it wasn't fear of riots that made him rub that writing off the wall. That was just an excuse. When Warren saw that writing, he knew exactly what it meant. And so did Mr. Crawford, the city solicitor. That's why he was so keen on the exact spelling of the word Jews. And the reason I twigged that was because I read a biography of Warren. That's what made the penny drop.
And what does it mean, John? I'm not used to this cat and mouse from you.
I can't say exactly. Not yet, anyway. But then, I don't belong. Do you?